We are live. So hello and welcome to Redspin's March CMMC Connect. My name's Lauren. I'm delighted to be your host kind of behind the scenes for today's event. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly say thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad you're here. A few housekeeping notes. This is an Ask Me Anything style presentation. The majority of our time today will be spent answering your questions. We're going to begin with answering questions that were submitted during the registration process. Then we'll host a live Q&A session. You can either type your questions in the Q&A box or simply raise your hand and Jeremy, our moderator, will unmute your microphone for you to ask your questions live. Next and last, I know you're probably already wondering, yes, a replay of the session and the slides will be shared within 48 hours. Okay, now I'd like to turn it over to our panel for introductions.
Thomas, well,
Sure.
First off, let me say thank you to everybody for taking the time to join us today. We appreciate it. We try to have fun with these things and answer as many questions as we can. So we'll make good use of everybody's time. Thomas, you want to start us off with the intros?
Sure. Dr. Thomas Graham, Vice President CISO for Redspin. I'm a certified assessor. I've led over 15 joint surveillance assessments now. I'm also a CMMC instructor. And as Jeremy likes to say, I'm the pretty face of Redspin.
Absolutely. Rob,
Right.
You want to go next?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. I got my thinking cap on, so I'm ready for you. I'm Rob Teague. I am the Director of CMMC Services at Redspin. I am also a CCP and CCA, and I do most of the QAs. I think I've done 15, 16 of those already at the C3PAO level. So looking forward to today.
And we are incredibly excited to have Noelle with us as well. So Noelle, I'll let you do your intro next.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you guys so much for asking me to join. I mean, any excuse to talk to Redspin, obviously. Of course. And to see Thomas's pretty face, obviously. That's really why we're all here, right? Yes. Hi, I'm Noelle Vestal. For those of you who don't know who I am the compliance officer at Prevail. We're an end-to-end encrypted email and file storage company. And we are also now officially the first and only cloud service provider to have FedRAMP moderate equivalent based on the FedRAMP moderate equivalency memo that came out in January. So thank you. Yeah, a lot of work. I'm happy to get questions, happy to talk to everybody today.
And my name is Jeremy Mares. I'm our VP of Federal Sales for Redspin, and for good or bad, have been on this roller coaster ride that we're all riding for the last 4 years. So with no further ado, we had some questions that were submitted in advance, so we're going to tackle those right out the gate, because if one person's asking them, it's likely others have the same question as well. So Lauren, you want to dive us into that first question? So this question kind of is asking about the 48 CFR and if there's any updates on it. Since this has definitely been Dr. Graham's bailiwick, I will turn it over to you, sir, just if there's any updates on it.
Well, honestly, I wish there was more definitive updates, but originally it was communicated that 48 CFR was going to drop its proposed rule within the month of March. The most recent information that's been communicated to us is it's going to be within the next 30 days, and that was as of the end of last week. So that is going to push it into April. Unfortunately, that means, yes, we are still waiting to see exactly how the DoD is going to implement it in contracts, which is what 48 CFR entails. For 32 CFR, well, comment period is closed. So now the true waiting game actually occurs. What's occurring now is the DoD has to adjudicate all those comments, and then it has to go back through a round of approvals, including up to Congress. However, we all know it's an election year, and we all know the joys that come with working with the government in an election year. The last information that we received is that the agency is going to do its best effort to get the rule finalized before 2025. And the key point with 2025 is that they are targeting prior to the start of the fiscal year, which means October 1. Again, the reason being they just don't want to have to deal with a whole new Congress and potentially having to go back through this thing again. For those waiting or taking note at home, that means you have less than 6 months now before 32 CFR officially becomes final and effective. What's been alluded to is there may be an additional time period between the rule finalizing and when official assessments can be conducted. We're waiting for definitive information from the Department of Defense on that. But again, the key metric there, they are working to have it finalized before the start of the fiscal year.
Excellent. Lauren, you want to roll us into the next one? Okay, so what guidance can you provide for email in meeting CMMC compliance? I swear this question was like tailor-made for our guest speaker today. So Noelle, this one is all yours.
I mean, if you insist. Yes, this is a great question, and it can be a really broad one. So I'm just going to do a very high level for email compliance. Remember that NIST Standard 171 CMMC Level 2 is talking about FIPS 140-2 encryption for anything that is being stored or transmitted. In this case, obviously, email is, if you are transmitting CUI through email, it's going to have to be FIPS 140-2 validated for its encryption. There's a lot of other things that you're going to have to make sure that you manage, but we would be here for a while if I went down the list. So that's the big one. The other one too, and this is for anything you're using to support your CUI assets or your security protection assets. If whatever email provider you're using has to be FedRAMP authorized or equivalent, like what Prevail is, but they also have to meet the DFAR 7 D12 C through G requirements. So that's something that I know sometimes we don't think about because CMMC seems like its own little thing, but it's really not. DFAR 7 D12 is where all this comes from originally. So be really sure that you are using somebody that does have an ATO or equivalency like Prevail, and make sure that they are FIPS 140-2 validated, and make sure that they can actually, say to you definitively, give you a letter like we do, for example, saying, yes, we will support you if there is a security incident, which is referencing DFAR C through G. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so is a CSP in ESP? Rob, I'm going to toss this one your way. I was maybe going to tackle it myself, but I'll stick in the moderator role. But this one's kind of a softball, so I'll throw this one at you.
Okay, so first of all, CSP is not an ESP because one starts with C and the other starts with E.
That's it. End of question. There you go. That's your answer.
Next.
We don't let him out of the office very much, folks, so I apologize.
No, so the cloud service provider is still a standalone kind of organization. They still have to have FedRAMP authorized or FedRAMP equivalency status in order to be a cloud service provider. The external service providers are going to be all those MSPs, the managed service providers, managed security service providers, VoIP companies, if you're using VoIP phones, all those kinds of things. They are going to be lumped into the external service provider category.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Lauren, next slide. Okay. Can we have FCI on an O365 commercial environment, or does it have to be on GCC high? And what are the responsibilities for ESPs under FedRAMP and CMMC and DFARS? So we've got kind of two questions in one here. So since you've got your thinking cap on, Rob, I'm going to throw this one your way too and make you go back to back.
Oh boy. Okay, so can you have FCI in the 365 commercial environment? I'm sorry. Yeah, I paused. That was my dramatic pause.
It was very dramatic. It was very.
Thank you. Yes, you can use the 365 commercial environment for that particular data set. However, if it's any type of CUI, you need to move to the next level up, which would be under Microsoft, the GCC environment, or you could add the Prevail solution, which would tap right on top of that, and you would be good to go. If you are dealing with ITAR or any other sensitive data, ear data, or something like that, you'll need Microsoft's GCC high environment, but it also Prevail's environment also suffices. So you wouldn't, it would act as a GCC or a GCC high environment for you. For the next one, the responsibilities for ESPs. So right now, under the rule, it states, which is causing a lot of confusion, and there's been some comments submitted back to the DoD for clarification on this. So hopefully, as the rule comes final, they clean this up a little bit so there's not as much confusion. Right now, the rule states that if you are an organization and you are leveraging a managed security service provider or one of these external service providers, they have to be certified before you can be certified. And that is currently what's written in the rule. And the problem with that is that you have to wait. So a lot of the C3PAOs that we have spoken with have actually got a lot of external service providers in the queue and waiting. So when CMMC finalizes, they will be front loaded in the assessment process so we can get them out of the way and thus open the door for all of their clients to get certification. However, under joint surveillance, which is currently the early adopter program that is going on, that is not the case. So if you jump into the joint surveillance assessments, you simply invite your external service provider personnel to the interview sessions of the assessment, and they will speak on the behalf of what they are doing. And that's how you get through the joint surveillance.
Excellent.
Back to you,
You're up. And as Thomas kind of mentioned earlier on, I think that very first question, we are in the adjudication process. The DoD is working their way through those comments. And we know, we submitted comments, other C3PAOs submitted comments surrounding that requirement for ESPs to be certified before the contractor can get certified. So we're hoping to see, a change in that. But, what Rob described is how the rule was published in December. So that's what we have to operate on for now. So, Lauren, next question. Can we discuss CMMC considerations when multiple companies share resources such as SharePoint and, companies that are sharing data with other companies that fall under the same parent company? Dr. Graham, how about you on this one?
Oh, you love throwing me the easy ones, don't you, Jeremy?
Well, this one's not that hard.
So, I mean, ultimately, when you're looking at this, what you're talking about is scope. And when you're talking about scope, the question always boils down to where is CUI stored, processed, or transmitted? So when you're looking at this from the context of sharing, if the resources are shared and they contain CUI, then you have to maintain the requirements for NIST 800-171 DFAR 7012 for whatever you're sharing. Now, I think, some of the questions come around, and this plays into the second part, sharing data with other companies. So if it's within your own environment, what you would identify, because these would be essentially external users potentially, how are you going about authorizing those external users? How are you going about limiting their access to the CUI information? Number one. Number two, the other way that you can share data is potentially they're external, even if they fall under the same parent company. And I use that word specifically because when you're talking about external connections and external access, keep in mind that under NIST 800-171, the term external means everything outside of your scope boundary. So you can be within the same company, but potentially external to the scoped environment for your CMMC assessment. Honestly, the only limitation on sharing, if you want to talk specifically limitations, depends on the type of CUI you have under your purview. If there's dissemination limitations, and I'm going to use no foreign as the example just because that's the one most folks understand. If you share that out, are you doing your due diligence to ensure it is being limited to only U.S. personnel? And if not, then that could potentially be a problem. But in the short version, that's how I would go about addressing those two particular items.
Yeah, if I can add to that, in SharePoint, you can also do folder level kind of requirements of who can go into the folder, who cannot. So you can put those kind of rules and restrictions on the folders within SharePoint. We've seen organizations actually segment internally within the cloud and just kind of mix it up and give each organization or department within that organization their own little slice of the pie, if you will. We've seen them using file safe shares, the secure emails such as Prevail's solution, or O365 at a GCC or GCC high. So there's numerous ways to tackle this. Don't let anybody tell you there's only one way to meet this. There's numerous ways.
Yeah, and we've seen this scenario come up quite often within the defense contractor space, where you have an enterprise level org and then you have like child companies underneath it, and then a single cloud environment is stood up, for this is where all the CUI assets for each of the child companies is going to live. So there's definitely ways to address it and tackle it and bring it, build it in a CMMC compliant fashion. So yeah, definitely reach out if you have further questions about it, and we can do a deep dive. So Lauren, you want to move us on to the next one? Okay. CUI categories in contract clauses and flow downs, even when the contract officer gets it wrong. The contract officers never get it wrong.
Never,
CUI
never.
is always labeled correctly.
Never
We
get it
all
wrong.
know
Yeah, of course.
that. So Rob, you're on a roll. I'll let you go with the thinking cap on this one.
All right. Well, first of all, you need to start drinking heavily, whatever that drink of your choice is. Okay, so there was a survey, not a survey, but an inspection, if you will, done by the Department of Defense's IG team. Yeah, Daniel, good bourbon, that's for sure. The result of that was the IG, Department of Defense IG, found out that contractors were labeling CUI properly. It was the Department of Defense that was not.
I'm
Shocker.
shocked, Rob.
Shocker. Oh my goodness. Yes. So I don't think that's something new to anybody on this joining us in this conversation. But yeah, the fact is the DoD is behind on their training of properly labeling CUI. The other piece that's kind of hard here is that the contracts that most of you currently have, contracts that you're preparing to bid on, don't have anything in it about CMMC. So you really got to look for the clauses. You need to look for the DFARS clause 7012. That right out the gate is going to let you know you're going to have CUI data. There's other clauses, the 7019, there's
7020.
the 7020, the 17 or the 7021. If you see all of those in there, more than likely you're going to have CUI. It just depends on the contract, but the best way to get through this is reach out to the point of contact for the contract itself and ask them. I think Jeremy, you and I were having a conversation with somebody and they were unsure if they had CUI data. And in fact, they thought they didn't. And we said, well, if you find out you do, give us a call and we'll have a conversation. Well, it was the next week they called us and set up a meeting because they found out they did have CUI data, which they were not tracking from the get-go. So they were way behind the power curve. So
Yeah, that
when
was
all
a
else
case.
fails. Yeah.
Yep, that was a case where the DoD wasn't marking it as CUI, but they had suspicions that it was CUI when they talked with the contracting officer and really dug in. The contracting officer told them, yes, it's CUI. It's not labeled. We apologize, but yeah, it's CUI. So as Rob said, those clauses are really going to be your indicator on, am I going to need CMMC? If so, am I level 1? Am I level 2? Potentially even level 3. But right now, that's where your arrows kind of direct you. So I want to keep moving so we can get to some of the open questions. Lauren, do we have another question?
Real quick, Jeremy. So for the level 1 contracts, you're going to be looking for the FAR 52.204.21. you're going to be looking for DFAR 7019 and 7020. All right, that's the level 1.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
Right there. Yeah, if anybody wants to, turn on their mic and jump in, and heck, even jump on camera and ask some questions or throw them in the chat, we would definitely be happy to tackle those. If not, I've got some backups in my back pocket.
Daniel's got his hand up, so.
Oh, all right. Let's open his mic. Actually, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon. So my question goes along with the ESP question with MSP and MSSPs. When you talked about the current guidance that you're with, is it the current rule or the proposed rule that you're following under as far as the guidance with MSPs and MSSPs in the having to be certified before they actually for an OSC actually seeking, that actual working with them? And it also goes into is since there technically is not a certification for CMMC yet, how exactly is all this being played? Because there's a lot of proposed rules. And just as an MSP and MSP, we're trying to figure these things out because we are an RPO, but trying to understand how things are going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely bourbon, Daniel. What'd you say? It's nice and smooth and easy.
Old Forester 1910. Very good, by the way. Very good.
It is actually.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeremy. You tackle this.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we're talking about all of this, we're pretty much operating on, what the DoD published December 26th and using that as the current marching orders. Now, yes, for those of us who've been in the space for the last several years, there's been a lot of twists and turns and ups and downs, but what they published to the Federal Register December 26th is essentially what was, moved into the public comment period, is now in the adjudication period, and is marching its way towards, that target of going live with fiscal year 2025 or October 1st for the rest of us on a regular calendar year. As it reads right now, it says MSP or ESP needs to be certified before the contractor can get certified. You are correct in that the vast majority of MSPs, MSSPs, other service providers don't have a contract with a DFAR 7012 clause in it, so they're not eligible for the Joint Surveillance Program. So they'll need to wait until CMMC is formally passed and goes live, so to speak, for a C3PAO to conduct a very likely a level 2 assessment on that service provider, so that they can then have that level 2 certification, and then the contractor can get their certification. And that's the part that we have difficulty with, in that it's essentially going to create quite a logjam. So we're hoping to see changes, but that's how it stands right now today. Is service providers will have to wait until the rule drops and goes live. Then they'll have to kick off their own certification assessment, and then the contractor can get certified behind them once their service providers are all SONA.
That's very much the situation that Prevail ended up in, because I've said this so many times, the cloud service provider community was in the exact same position that you as an MSP are in now. We had no definition for equivalency up until January of this year. So for these past 4 or 5 years, it was the same situation. We would tell customers we were equivalent based on the understanding we had of it, but there was nothing formalized anywhere. So it's kind of the same situation you're running into, where we had customers who were being told they couldn't be compliant using us because we weren't equivalent, but equivalency wasn't defined. So you're ending up in a chicken and the egg sort of problem, which is exactly where I feel like MSPs are kind of landing right now. So I agree with Jeremy. I really hope that they make it very clear, and MSPs don't have to go through the same rigmarole that the CSP community had to go through, because it's a lot.
Well, because I know as an MSP, we have a lot of tools we use to support our clients.
Right.
And now as an MSP, all those tools are not going to have to go or be some sort of FedRAMP. And this is what we're going into, is because technically, how can we be or even get in a queue once it finally comes out, fiscal year 2025, aka October 1st, it drops. How can we as an MSP go actually into the queue or even start to get certified when none of our cloud provider, our SaaS providers we use are even close to being FedRAMP?
Yeah, again,
so this is everything we're getting into. So it's like, I look and we actually go through, we actually are looking to go to that, but it's like we technically can't because the SaaS services we use are not FedRAMP monitored, FedRAMP equivalent, the way that it's worded. So we're literally at a rock and a hard place. Like, well, we can't go through this because our SaaS providers and what SaaS providers are. We have
Yeah.
a lot of things as an MSP and MSSP that we use to service our clients. So it's and that's what I'm trying to get guidance at, because we are trying to go through it, but we really technically can't right now because we have a lot of SaaS providers that aren't FedRAMP moderate, and we got to find those actual SaaS solutions that are, and it's very difficult, especially in the CSP and the ESP community.
So
Yeah.
there is some indication from the agency that they're going to try and make it, and this is their terminology, not mine. They're going to try and make it easier for organizations to join the FedRAMP program. What that actually means, nobody knows yet. That was just the statement that came out. The roadblock to a lot of these organizations, whether it be SaaS providers or others, to become FedRAMP authorized is that to become an official member of the program, you have to have that sponsoring agency. And unless you have that sponsoring agency, which is what Prevail ran into, you just can't be considered truly FedRAMP. You can be FedRAMP ready, but you can't be truly FedRAMP without that. So I would pay attention to any information that comes out around that. Hopefully it will be soon, but again, it's a wait and see at this point.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, I think I sparked a lot of comments on the side over here, so I'll step away and actually have other Q&A.
There's one comment I want to throw your way, Thomas or Rob, either one of you, whichever one wants to jump in. There's a question about, we get mostly ITAR, EAR type of CUI categories, technical specifications. What is the marking guidance for data that they generate under the contract that is their own intellectual property?
So I did respond to that in the chat, Jeremy, but if it's truly ITAR or EAR, and when I say truly, it's defined under the purviews of the contract that what you're creating is CUI for the government. Then when you're looking for marking guidance, NARA is the executive agent over CUI. Please look at their marking handbook. It'll give you the specific guidance that you're looking for pretty much any media where you have this.
Sorry, that was me who was asked. If that's okay, I'll follow up with that question. So it'll give you the guidance of how to mark it. It doesn't give you the guidance of what to mark.
So with what to mark, I know the marking handbook has several examples in there. The good rule of thumb is wherever you're storing it, if it's in paper form, if it's stored on USB, if it's stored DVD, even the systems that could be accessing it, you have to have the proper markings in place. If it's being included in email, there's very specific marking guidance that's provided.
If you don't mind, I guess my question is specific to this. So you have a technical specification for which you generate a product that you generate drawings, you generate top assembly, you generate detailed drawings, test reports. That's kind of the business we're in. And the question is, if obviously we protect the information that we get, the technical specification, but when we generate our detailed drawing, must we mark it CUI, or can we say, look, this is our intellectual property. It doesn't belong to the federal government. So
if under the purview of the contract, that technical drawing is considered CUI, then it should be marked somewhere on that drawing. Generally, what I've seen is it'll be in a legend in a lower corner and upper corner. But when you're getting into the discussion of intellectual property versus CUI created under the auspices of a contract, that's something, honestly, you need to involve two parties. You need to involve your legal counsel as well as your contracting officer for some of those specifics. And I know it's easier to say that than to get a definitive answer out of those folks at times.
Yeah, I think I asked this question about 100 times. Never got a straight answer.
And let me guess, you got 100 different answers.
I'm sorry. I'll just hang in there then. Thanks.
Hang in there. I know we're coming to a close, and I know there's some other great questions coming in. So we'll try to capture these and roll them into next month's session. But just remember, I think Jeremy is the one that mentioned it when we were on a call with a particular client that was seeking some information. And you know, as anything new, when it starts, there's always going to be hiccups. There's always going to be issues that we run into that need to be addressed and overcome. We're hoping that the DoD will clarify a lot of the terminology and things they wrote into the proposed rule. I'm sure they will. They've done a fantastic job thus far. I mean, that rule was actually written very, very well. So, you know, as we start to roll through for the MSPs out there, just be patient, hang in there. Let's see what this final rule looks like. We got a 6-month wait period anyway before we can start phase 2 certifications. So let's just see what that final rule says, and then we'll all come back together and see what happens next. So thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Lauren, you want to close us out?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. And at Redspin, we are here to help and committed to your success. So if you have additional questions, we'll try to address them in our April session, but please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can email info@redspin.com, and we will answer your questions directly. So with that, we'll go ahead and end today's call. Thank you, Rob, Thomas, Jeremy, and Noel. It's been an excellent session, and thanks to our attendees for joining in on the conversation.
Yeah,
Next month
thanks.
needs to be an hour.
Yeah, we need to
Right.
we need to bump these to an hour. The conversations are really good. So appreciate all
Thank
the
you,
great
everybody.
questions, guys.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a good
Great
one.
one.